Of conversations today, and I'm intrigued about it. And I wanted to start actually with Newcastle, partly because they've accused Manchester United of damaging their transfer window. All players are now more expensive because Man United paid 60. Well, they actually lied in the article. Their journalists said we paid 65 million for Cunha. It wasn't. It was 62. But okay. But basically saying United have inflated the market by buying Cunha at his buyout clause rate. And equally, we have inflated artificially the market because we're going to spend 60 million on Mbeumo, and they're blaming us for them having to spend 125 million pounds on James Trafford, João Pedro, and Elanga. Thoughts on this interesting accusation from Newcastle United?
Oh, where do you start with it? Manchester United are not responsible for football clubs asking for more money for their players. That is not true. At the end of the day, football hasn't been a buyer's market for about 4 years at an absolute minimum. Because as football clubs make more money from sponsorships and more money from TV deals, they have less of a need to sell their players to make up the money. So therefore, when a team comes in for their player, they can ask for more money. Guess what? Every club does it, including Newcastle. But they don't like it when it goes against them.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're the ones that are asking for 200 million pound for a striker whose current market value is 120 million, but yet they're blaming Man United. It's very, very interesting. Very interesting.
They don't like the fact that they can't get the targets, and every football fan's like that. I hate it when we miss out on targets. I have for 3 years. We still have not bought a DM because every single time we go for one, we get rejected. But guess what? I'm not sitting there going, oh, that's Chelsea's fault for inflating the market. No, that's the way football's gone. As teams make more money, they have less of a need to sell, so they have higher asking prices. That's how it is. There's no... Manchester United is not the sole reason this has happened. Every football club across the past 6 years is the reason that we are in this situation. And the TV deals from the last 6 years are the reason we're in this situation. Everything in football is the reason we are in this situation. Not Manchester United paying a release clause for a footballer. As much as I wish it was.
Though, isn't it? It's always United that are like their names dragged through the mud. It doesn't matter what they do, that they'll always have like bad press around them. I don't really understand it. Like Tom said, this has been happening for a decade or so now. Like players are going to get more and more expensive as years go by. There's more revenue streams into football clubs. There's more. I mean, look at Chelsea, for instance, selling this, selling that to get by. Like, I don't understand how Man United paying a release clause for a player affects Newcastle United.
Like, look how many players over the past years have gone for like over 100 million. Like back in the day, an 100 million pound, 100 million euro transfer would be like unheard of. Like you'd still be talking about it 2 months after it happened. But Chelsea, for instance, we bought 2 of them in the space of 7 months in Enzo and Caicedo. It's like that's just the way football's gone, especially as people say England tax as well. Everyone's going to try and get as much as they can for their players now. Like there's one point I'm sure Crystal Palace wanted 100 mil for Adam Wharton.
This is so true, and the bit that I think is disgusting about this article is one. Of course, a lot of Newcastle fans I know are going to agree with it because United overpaying was the reason they gave as the excuse they didn't get either player. Overpaying salary. It turns out he's getting 150 a week, which is really good money. But as a 27-year-old joining the most famous club in England, one of the biggest in the world, and being tasked with being an imperative part of the rebuild, of course he's going to get paid well. But the bit that's so funny is I did the maths and I just used transfermarket.co.uk because that's what they use as their base mark of the valuation. Since Newcastle, the bit that I find really distasteful, really distasteful, is they make it sound like United started the trend this summer, 2025, of overpaying for players to try and fix our club. And you're ignoring the previous decades where multiple signings by every single club, almost every window for 20 years plus, clubs have paid above market value, including Newcastle, who have paid over 154 million euros above market value since their takeover. nearly every single major signing they have had, and this is all factual, and you can go through it from. I think there's a couple that were undervalued. I think like Kieran Trippier was one of the only guys that was undervalued, but Chris Wood's market value was 6 million. They paid, this is euros, they paid 30. Bruno Guimaraes, 30 million, paid 42. Joe Willock's valuation was 16, they paid 29. Dan Burns' valuation when they bought him was 3 million. They paid 15 for him, and so on and so forth. And by the way, I don't begrudge Newcastle that. At no stage did I say that was wrong. But this idea suddenly that Man United are going to be vilified because we've paid above market, Liverpool paid above market value for Verts when you check based on the website that they're using as their source. Even City this summer paid 5 million over the valuation of Rangers. So it's just really disingenuous. What I think is true is, yes, they've shown their hand that they have the money for these players, because all the clubs that went for Mbeumo would have been happy to have paid the transfer fee. You just didn't. The others just didn't get picked. Now, what the likes of Newcastle know, now what the likes of Burnley know and Brighton know, is they've got the cash. And once you've shown your hand that you have the cash, it's hard to get away with not paying top dollar. And that's why most clubs always overpay market value, because it's a seller's market, because most clubs have cash and have money, as Tom alluded to. I think it's really disingenuous. But I have a question for you guys, a fiction or football question in relation to Newcastle. Newcastle spending £125 million, according to the article, on João Pedro, James Trafford, and Anthony Elanga is a poor use of their Champions League funds. Fiction or football?
Who are the three signings again? João Pedro,
James Trafford, Anthony Elanga. Reportedly, it's going to cost them their Champions League money of 125 million. This statement says here, Newcastle spending 125 million on João Pedro, James Trafford, and Anthony Elanga is a poor use of that money.
I don't know. It's hard because João Pedro, I think, is not a good signing. I think Elanga, because isn't Jacob Murphy looking to be moving on? Or is he going to be staying? I don't know.
I think he'll stay. Do you think Pedro's a bad signing, dear?
I just don't think that he doesn't upgrade Newcastle. I didn't want him at Chelsea, but because I don't know.
How do you upgrade Alexander Isak?
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. That's my point. Like he's not an upgrade. You're going to spend, let's say, on average 40 million per player if it's 120 million. James Trafford.
I'd say fiction. I think that's a good spend of money. I'd go against that and say Trafford's homegrown player who's going to be a backup goalkeeper who likelihood in the 2 years' time will take over Pope. Pedro can play left wing, right wing, 20 plus GA last year for Brighton, and Newcastle are going to have, in all comps, I think I might be wrong. He might have got 17, but it was close to 20. I think he's a good player. I take him at Spurs, and he's a backup to Alexander Isak. Like, how do Newcastle spend money on a forward who, based off of last season, improves that front line that Murphy got like 20 plus GA. They've got a good left hand side with Gordon and Barnes. I don't think that's horrendous. They've already got one of the best midfielders in the league. I mean, based on what Tottenham have done over the years and spending our Champions League money, I think that's from Newcastle's. I think that's pretty good. The only one you question is probably Trafford.
I'll be honest.
Elanga's a good option as well.
Elanga's the one that I'm fully on board with. I think that's a good deal. I don't think they get all them for 125 million. I think they're going to have to end up paying a bit more than that. I think Brighton and what is Trafford at Burnley? Yeah, Burnley especially probably hoping to get a little bit more out of Newcastle. So I'd expect it to be closer to 140, 150.
If it's 150, then it's stupid in my opinion.
I mean, Trafford, I'm looking at with a very sort of confused thing because he was really quite bad last time he was in the Premier League, and then he went to the Championship and had the best defenses in the league in front of him, so looked pretty good. Now, is he going to go back to Newcastle and adapt to the Premier League this time? Maybe, but I'm a bit and ahhing about that. Elanga, good pickup, showed his quality at Forest, which is a team that play a similar style of football, which is what I'm trying to consider here. Newcastle want to play on the counter, and thrive in transition. Elanga is brilliant in transition on that right. And the right wing, I know they've got Jacob Murphy there now, but it's always good to have an option like Anthony Elanga, who is, 24? So he's got a lot more years left in the tank than 30-year-old Jacob Murphy. Joao Pedro, I've never been a big fan of. He scores 5 non-penalty goals last season in 30 games. 5. Like, and when we're saying where's he going to fit, it's a lot of money for a backup who I don't think can play on the wings. So you're paying 60 million plus for a backup striker to Isak potentially, who scores 5 goals because Isak takes the penalties. And if it's not Isak, then it's Bruno Guimaraes or Anthony Gordon. And that, if I'm being very honest, very, very, very honest, Newcastle need a centre-back. If all their spending is done and they don't get a centre-back, I am very confused. And I think they've left themselves short because their squad is very much the same squad that was in the Champions League last time. And that squad couldn't handle both competitions at the same time. And as such, they went out very early in the Champions League and finished like 7th or 8th in the Premier League. That squad isn't very different to the one now. Centre-back wise, Botman likes an injury and he's had a couple of major ones, which mean he's more prone to them. Dan Burn is serviceable. Fabian Schär is getting on and it starts to pick up injuries.
Schär and Burn.
So we've got 2 33-year-olds and a 27-year-old who gets injured every other week. And who after that? Jamal Lascelles. Is he even still there? This is what I'm saying. Yeah. They cannot go into next season with just 3 centre-back options of Botman, Schär, and Burn. They had to, in my eyes, centre-back was the priority this summer for Newcastle. You had to get a top centre-back because you don't progress as a club unless you can build on a solid defence. I don't think James Trafford is this great keeper. I think he's a couple of years away from that if he's ever going to get there. And centre-back-wise, that centre-back isn't good. That centre-back unit isn't good enough in my eyes. It's not. For where Newcastle want to be, that centre-back unit is not good enough. And they had to go out. And I know they tried for Gahey last summer. And I don't think they're going to get him now because we're in for him. But that shouldn't mean that you go, okay, well, we're just not going to get anyone. Centre-back was a priority for Newcastle. Elanga's a good pickup. Very unsure about Joao Pedro. Very unsure about James Trafford. The fact they're not buying a centre-back means that is fact. I think they could have spent that money better. And it makes me wonder if they're going to try and get more money out of that squad and sell someone to try and build a better squad.
If you were to do the signings individually, like we'll start Elanga, I think would be a good signing. Trafford, again, he might be an okay signing, but with still question marks whether or not he can readapt to the Premier League. And then for me, Joao Pedro, I don't think is a good signing for Newcastle, especially.
How old is Trafford?
22.
He's quite young. 22. So he's a very inexperienced goalkeeper he's not going to be, if they sign him, he's not going to be the number 1 for at least.
I think he comes in and you're not going to spend that much money. I don't think Newcastle can spend that much money and not have him as the number 1.
That's what I mean.
But I don't think they're going to spend.
You cannot spend your Champions League budget on a goalie to be second choice. I'm sorry, it doesn't work. Not when you've got holes in that squad, like at centre back, which I mentioned. You cannot justify spending your Champions League budget on a backup goalie. If James Trafford's joining Newcastle, he's joining to start. And then I've got question marks also because he was not any good last time in the Premier League. Didn't he get dropped for that Muric, who was even worse, as we've seen at Ipswich? So again, real question marks. He could be good, but unless
that one is a gamble, but
developed, I just don't see it in the immediate future.
I don't think Pedro's a bad signing. What's the fee they're quoting for Pedro?
Like 65, 70 million?
50, 60 million for a player that he hasn't got a set position. He can't, as Tom said, he can't play on the wings. He's not an upgrade.
That price is...
5 non-penalty goals last season. 5.
I have loads of the only people that rave about him are my friends who are mainly Watford fans, obviously, while he was there. But no one I know really rates him other than that. Like I didn't want him at Chelsea. When I heard the reports about him leaving Chelsea, I was like, no, because he's not an upgrade on anyone. Like who's Newcastle's number 10 at the moment? Isn't it like
play with one? They play with 2.
They don't really play with one, do they?
They've got Bruno and
so they don't play with number 10, so that means he's going to play striker, and he's not going to start over Isak, is he?
Yeah, but they do have a lot more. Like they've got minimum of 48 games next season minimum. You'd imagine they'll probably get quarterfinals of FA Cup and League Cup. They've got 8 games minimum in the Champions League. Joao Pedro will get a lot of game time. But I don't see
I don't
how
think
you
game time's the
upgrade
question.
on.
It's just quality. I don't think he's good enough. And I think in terms of play style, it's a massive shift away from what Isak is. And how's the team going to adapt to a player who's so
think he can
different?
play in the 10?
Yeah,
they don't play with a 10, and you don't want to change that midfield. That midfield is Newcastle's best attribute because no Premier League team can compete with that midfield.
Look, it's certainly an interesting one. Viewers, we want to get your views.